Welcome. I'm Courtney. I work here at the library, and we're so excited to have Kathy here bringing her brand new book to share with you. I'll just tell you a couple housekeeping things. We are also joined by folks on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom and you have a question, please put it in the chat and I'll raise my hand and speak your question aloud. We're also recording, so you might be able to see this on webcam or our YouTube page after the presentation. And now I will hand it over to Gretchen.
So, hi friends, I think we know almost everybody in the room, and for those we don't know, hi friends, that's cool. I just found out that I got to do this, so this is going to be off the cuff. But you all know Kathy, you all know what an amazing speech therapist, yes, that she is, and the dedication that she puts to her work with her kids. She gave that equal dedication to this amazing book. This was like giving birth for Kathy. It is part Kathy for those of us who know her well. It is absolutely part Kathy, and it is absolutely part fiction, extraordinaire, excitement, love story, just fantastic. So I am thrilled that she's here to read to you because she's a great reader and she answers terrific questions. So think about your questions. You'll be thrilled at the end. And for my friends on Zoom, hi guys. When Kathy's done answering questions and you're typed in questions, they're going to turn you around so she can see you and say hi particularly to you. So without further ado, I think Kathryn Crawley is right. Kathryn Crawley is the author of the day and ready to share with you her fabulous words. Well, it's such a treat to get to be here. This building was part of the geography of my work life when I worked here for 20 years. So it's a huge treat to get to be here. Thank you to Courtney and the Wayland Free Public Library. Thank you to Valdo for your setup. And I think we all know that it's more important than ever that we show love to our libraries. So thank you for letting me be here this afternoon. Thank you to Gretchen. She supported me at the very beginning and along every step of the way. She and Bob and her mother helped choose the cover for my book. And she brought their beverages today, and everybody should be so lucky as to have a Gretchen What's in their life. So thank you, Gretchen. And thanks to Kathy McGinnis for bringing the cookies. And Kathy was an early supporter of my writing ever since an article that I wrote appeared in 2000 in the Globe, in the Readers Forum about getting a nose piercing. So thanks, Kathy. And thanks to you all for being here today and spending your Saturday afternoon listening to my words. And friends on Zoom, thank you all for being here too. So my novel is set in Thessaloniki, Greece. Thessaloniki is the second largest city in Greece. It's 300 miles north of Athens, and it's a port city at the edge of the Aegean. It was established in 315 BCE and is the hometown of Alexander the Great. So today, I'd like to read excerpts from 3 different chapters, and then we'll have a question and answer afterwards. So I want to set the scene for my novel with a short portion from chapter 1. Words buzz past like angry bees. On the edge of her chair and listening intently, Kate tried to grab a familiar Greek word amid the scramble of sounds. Announcements from the Olympic airline loudspeaker in New York's Kennedy Airport waiting area came in a steady stream. First in Greek, then in English, then French. Despite working the past 3 months to learn the Greek language, Kate could make out only Kalispera or good evening. She glanced down at the dark blue textbook open on her lap. Conversational Greek. Worry spun circles inside her chest. With effort, Kate could read sentences about Peter attending classes at the university or Mary going for lunch, but neither those words nor the memory of her tutor's slow-paced voice were anything like what surrounded her now. She closed the book. At 25 years of age, this was Kate's first time in New York. It was September 1974. Here, people walked too quickly and spoke too fast. They didn't smile or offer an excuse me after bumping into her. The sheer number of people was overwhelming, in stark contrast to her early morning start in Texas. After the hour drive from her hometown to Lubbock, she was comfortable in the airport with cowboys in wide-brimmed hats and women whose teased hair reached skyward. At Love Field in Dallas, the men wore business suits and women's hairstyles were more fashionable. But most everyone was friendly, or at least polite. New York was full of unwelcoming strangers with eyes fastened straight ahead. She had an hour before boarding the late evening flight. Kate went into a phone booth, crammed herself in her carry-on bag inside. Hands shaking, she slipped a dime into the slot for a collect call to her parents in their small West Texas town. As they accepted the charges, she imagined them joining together and sharing the earpiece of the kitchen phone, her father's balding head against her mother's always perfect hairdo. As they greeted her, the sound of their voices made her voice catch in her throat. What have I done? She was on her way to a distant country where she wouldn't know a soul. Kate wished she was back in her parents' kitchen for a fleeting moment, in her chair between the two of them, finishing dinner before heading to the TV room. Her finger traced the slots for nickels, dimes, and quarters on the payphone. Earlier in the summer, Kate had been thrilled with the offer of a speech therapy position in a center for Greek cerebral palsy children in the Northeast port city of Thessaloniki. She had resigned from her job in Colorado, packed boxes, and piled clothes into her orange Carmen Ghia for the drive back home to Texas, ready for an exciting overseas adventure. Her giddy anticipation came to an abrupt halt one morning, several weeks before she was scheduled to leave in mid-September. Kate stepped off her parents' porch into the already blinding sun for the rolled-up Lubbock newspaper. Sliding the rubber band off the paper, she was shocked by the photograph on the front page. Angry protesters in Athens gathered around a burning American flag, flames shooting into the air. Kate couldn't believe what she read next. American tourist cameras were smashed to the ground in Thessaloniki. Thessaloniki, in a very short time, Greece and Thessaloniki had migrated to the center of her universe. Her destination for a job and a new home had now become a danger zone. Propped against pillows on her bed, Kate read accounts in Time magazine that anti-American sentiment was rampant after the collapse of the Greek dictatorship in July. Greece and Turkey were at war over Cyprus. But why blame all of this on us, on America? She said aloud to Shotzi, the dachshund nestled beside her. His brown eyes looked up at her expectantly. He had no answer. So during the next chapters in Kate's next several months in Greece, she gradually becomes more fluent in Greek and devises strategies for working with her Greek cerebral palsy children at the center called Elipop. I'd like to read you a little bit from one of those therapy sessions. In her therapy room at Elipop, Kate smiled at the first name on the list for today, Dimitris Repanidis. He was the boy she'd seen on her first visit to Elipap, as he and his mother were getting off the van, the one who had gone straight to her heart. He was always carried around the center by his mother and was probably 6 or 7 years old. His smile was bright, despite the severe cerebral palsy that twisted his arms and legs. Arranging 2 adult chairs and bringing the specially made padded seat from the corner, Kate waited for the center's van. Then she heard doors slamming outside and the buzz of voices. The children had arrived. Kate listened for the sound of footsteps outside her open door. Oh, I forgot to say that the Greek that you'll hear is pretty much explained in the narrative, but there are 2 words, thespinis, which means miss, and Kate is referred to as Katharina, and the word Kyria, which means Mrs. Come have a seat, Ingrid. Then she heard doors slamming outside and the buzz of voices. The children had arrived. Kate listened for the sound of footsteps outside her open door. Thespinis Katerina? The woman's voice was soft. Kind eyes and a timid smile lined the face of Kyria Repanidis. Dimitris was wrapped in her arms. Her brownish red hair was in a style that required minimal care, and she was dressed in black, the sign of mourning for a relative. Kalimera, Yasu Dimitri. Kate wished them a good morning and said hello to the boy. Tatsiste parakalo. Kate gestured to a chair, asking Kyria Repanidis to please sit. Dimitris's eyes were a pale color of blue, and his skin was light and smooth, almost like porcelain. Her greeting had created waves of excited movement throughout his body. His squirming on her lap was something Kyria Repanidis seemed to be well practiced at containing. Cerebral palsy children often had difficulty controlling not only their bodies, but also their emotions, resulting in overflowing extraneous movements. His mother's tone was reassuring and musical. Kate had heard similar words other times from mothers telling their child that they were coming to see a nice lady. Dimitris voiced a sound Kate recognized as an affirmation of what had been said, accompanied by a purposeful blink of his eyes. This was a good sign. Dimitris was using one of the few things he could control, his eyes, to communicate. Kate watched Dimitris's eyes dart about, following the conversation and responding with appropriate facial expressions. Kyria Repanidi, τι? Kate was asking what priorities Kyria Repanidis had for her son. Dimitris's mother responded slowly and with gestures to make sure Kate understood. Δεν τρώει κανονικό φαγητό και τον έχω ξάπλα. He ate pureed foods and she fed him lying back in her arms. She continued quietly. Δεν μιλάει. Θέλω να μιλήσει, αλλά δεν ξέρω. Kyria Repanidis confirmed that he couldn't talk. She wanted him to be able to speak. Her voice trailed off after confessing she didn't know if that would ever be possible. As his mother talked, Kate reached out to stroke Dimitris's hand, seeing if he would tolerate her touch and judging how pliable his muscles would be if she tried moving them in new positions. Dimitris watched her intently with large, beautiful eyes, taking in everything going on around him. Satisfied with the inroads she was making, Kate decided to go the next step. Dimitraki. Kate switched to the diminutive form, an affectionate way of talking to children. She asked if he wanted to meet her special chair. And she had toys. Kyria Repanidis smiled at her son's excitement with this last statement. Dimitris blinked affirmatively. Kate removed the tray from the specially made chair and slowly Kyriapanidis manipulated his legs around its center post, holding him in place until Kate could push the rounded semicircle tray in front of him. Since the chair provided support with its curved back, Dimitris could sit independently instead of in his mother's arms. The expression on his face changed abruptly to fear and concern. Tears welled in his eyes. Instantly, his mother used her lyrical voice to reassure him he was fine and special toys were coming. Kate watched with admiration the talent of this mother and her skill in assisting her son. Behind her back, Kate had two wind-up toys, one in each hand. She then revealed them, positioning the toys far apart in opposite directions. Asking him which he preferred, Dimitris quickly turned his head toward the right hand, which held a mouse on a bicycle. With this simple test, Kate determined that he could use his eyes to communicate to others. By presenting a choice of two objects held in different directions, caregivers could let Dimitris show a preference. Did he want a drink or did he want a cookie? Did he want a book or a toy? Kate would share this approach with teachers and therapists upstairs. He could begin to rely on adults other than his mother for understanding his needs. Dimitris could become more independent. Next, Kate wound the wind-up toy he had chosen. Dimitris chortled with glee, watching the mouse pedal around on his tray. It stopped. He looked at her. Kate then used a shortened version of Kialo for more, asking him, Alo? Dimitris blinked. This wasn't good enough for Kate. She wanted him to respond vocally with two syllables. Could he imitate what she was saying? Could he use two sounds rather than the single sound she had heard him say? She overemphasized two parts of the word. Alo? Came the response. Kate wound the mouse, watching Dimitris's reaction while glancing at his mother to see if she understood what had happened. Her eyes were moist and her smile was wide. As Kate moves further into this new life, she makes good friends and becomes more comfortable in Greek society. She begins to understand the anti-American sentiment, which was based on the CIA involvement in the past 7 years of the military dictatorship. It was a time of strict rules that governed Greek society and the exile, jailing, and even worse, of political opponents. There was also severe censorship of films, books, musics, even the Beatles. So Kate meets and falls head over heels in love with Thanasis, a handsome, charismatic Greek communist student. Having run away to Greece partly to escape the heartbreaking disappointment of a failed marriage, Kate is even more compelled by this captivating relationship. So the title, Walking on Fire, is metaphorical, but I'd like to jump ahead to a chapter later in the book that introduces the literal origin of the title. In Langadas, a village a short distance from Thessaloniki, a ritual fire walking ceremony is held each year on the name day celebration for Constantine and Helen, two of the most revered saints in Greek Orthodoxy. The ritual commemorates an event many years before in a different village when refugees from Asia Minor came to Greece in a population exchange between Greece and Turkey in the early 1920s. The village church was burning. Passers-by heard cries from inside and rushed into the church to rescue the icons of Constantine and Helen. They did not get burned. Kate convinces a reluctant Thanasis to let her accompany him to Langadas. Despite the irresistible nature of the relationship, Kate has begun to suspect that Thanasis is being less than truthful with her. She is aware that there are people in his life he does not want her to meet. Kate watched the Thanasis get out of the car and gather their jackets from the back seat. She admired his lithe body, the way his movements flowed from one to the next, his handsome profile. The past days had been a roller coaster, but she willingly signed up to continue the ride. Dust from the field coated her shoes as they followed the crowd to the far side of the village. Vendors sold bread rings topped with sesame seeds, as well as souvlaki and chestnuts from the grill. Music from transistor radios and the enticing smell from braziers created a festive atmosphere. Isn't this supposed to be a religious ceremony? Kate asked the Thanasis. We Greeks are never very far from our stomachs. He slipped his hand into hers and squeezed it. As they moved into the crowd, she glanced at him, hoping he could find whatever had brought him here. A faint smell of smoke in the air reminded Kate of homecoming bonfires before high school football games. Despite the recent uncertainties, the Thanasis hand gave her strength as it pulled her into another new experience. With him by her side, Kate didn't care. She was probably the only non-Greek in Langadas that day. Ahead, a group of people milled about in a yard while others lined up to enter a small house. Kate and the Thanasis took their places with the crowd and waited. He puffed on a cigarette and she studied those in line. Mixed in with the villagers in their Sunday best were city people, women with stylish outfits and prominently displayed gold crosses around their necks. Finally, it was their turn. Bending slightly to fit through the tiny door frame, Kate immediately sensed an electricity. The crowded room had low ceilings and rugs covered the uneven surface of a packed dirt floor. Sweet-smelling smoke drifted from an incense burner. Red scarves intertwined with an assortment of icons on a mantle over an empty fireplace. Onlookers ringed an open space for some kind of ritual already underway. A group of half a dozen men and women danced from one end of the room to the other, back and forth and back and forth. Some held icons, the sacred painting she knew to be Constantine and Helen, while another carried an oversized Bible. In one corner, 3 older men sat on stools, singing and accompanying themselves with a drum and small stringed instruments played with a bow. The snatches of words she caught from the songs told stories of kidnapping, wolves, and a young Constantine going to war. Minor key tones and nasal voices melded together. A few of the dancers twirled red scarves to the beat of music that snaked around the room. Red scarves? Kate whispered to Thanasis. Does that mean they're communist? In Kate's mind, the color had become associated with that political party. Thanasis clicked his tongue and raised his head, the familiar gesture indicating negation. They are the opposite of communists. That red is for the blood of Christ. Kate remembered Kokinopemti, or Red Thursday, the day during Holy Week of Easter, to dye eggs red and to hang red tablecloths or rugs from balconies to honor the blood and sacrifice of Christ. The dancers were like typical Greeks she would see on the street, middle-aged with plain clothing. The facial expressions, however, made them unusual. Making eye contact with no one, the dancers stared straight ahead while gliding past one another, as if in a trance. The musical background and the motion of the dancers captured Kate. It was as if she were being transported into a magic fable. Something released inside her. She swayed from side to side. The warmth of the room, the incense, and the mesmerizing cadence took her further away from consciousness. Kate was aware only of being deeply lost in colors and fractured images. Abruptly, someone bumped her. The spell had broken, and she was jostled out of her reverie. The Nazi's eyes were fixed on the door. Kate watched as a man in a leather jacket left the room. Although she only saw his back, there was something familiar about the figure. The Thanasis' focus was held by something. Who is that? she whispered. We must go. His voice was jagged. Once outside the house, Kate reached for his hand. What was that about? Are you okay? From Thanasis's eyes came the familiar connection, but there was also something else, a glimmer of uncertainty. Please, do not worry. His gaze stayed with her for a moment, like he weighed something in his mind. Before she could form another question, he pulled her forward. Come, we do not want to miss it. She grabbed his hand tightly as they followed others to a field. A sizable crowd had already gathered in a semicircle around a smoldering bonfire. Two men began to break up the burning wood with long poles and rake it into a large circle of glowing red and orange embers. The group quieted. Steady drumbeats, like a message from an oversized heart, sounded from the direction of the small house. Day had melted into dusk. Embers from the fire glowed intensely. Letting go of Thanasis' hand, Kate moved in front of him to get a better view. A procession of the men and women dancers from the house appeared out of the darkness. They carried white candles, shadows of flames playing across their faces. Barefooted, they approached with determined steps, wearing the same trance on their faces as when they had danced. Those accompanying them carried the icons in the large Bible. The firewalkers strode through an opening in the crowd and approached the outer edge of the circle. The drum abruptly changed to a rapid, feverish beat. Handing off the candles to their escorts, they skipped and danced over the glowing coals, picking up sparks from the embers with their bare feet. Riveted, Kate watched their movements as they ran over hot cinders. Once across the diameter of the circle, they ground their feet in the dirt and raced back again to their starting place. One part of Kate searched for any tricks used of stepping so lightly on the coals to avoid getting burned. Another part was transfixed, almost believing a miracle was happening. After 3 complete trips, the drum stopped, ending in one loud, sudden bang. The group's leader shouted a phrase Kate didn't understand. She sought a translation from Thanasis. He was not there. Instead, she was face to face with an elderly Greek woman clad in black, making the sign of the cross repeatedly upon her chest. The old woman gazed beyond Kate with milky eyes, moving her head rhythmically and chanting. Thank you. So,
You're gonna stay and.
say again. So if anybody has any questions or any comments, I'd be very happy to have a conversation.
How long did it take you to write the book?
Well, I actually started writing the book, writing stories about Greece as soon as I came back from Greece, because I did live in Greece from 1974 to 1976. And some of those stories from writing groups and writing classes did make it into the book, but I really didn't start in earnest writing until I retired in 2016. And it took probably about six years after that to get the book together in enough of a form that it was completed, I thought, and I could present it to a publishing house to see about getting it published. So I would say, you know, either between 7 years or between however 1976 and 2021. Yes, Katie.
When you were in Greece, so that was amazing. Like, you used to buy the book.
Thank you.
When you were in Greece, did you keep a journal when you have your time?
So I don't know if
Yeah,
the,
it'd be helpful if you
yeah.
repeat.
So Katie is asking if I kept a journal when I was in Greece, and the answer is no. But I did write letters to my parents every week. And when we were selling my parents' home, I found a box in the back of her closet, and she had saved every letter I'd ever written, from Girl Scout camp in Sweetwater, Texas, through college, and then the Greek letters. So I was able to use them to help me out with remembering things. But yeah, so I think that's the answer. Yes, Courtney.
A question from Cheryl. Did you actually attend that fire ceremony?
So Cheryl's asking if I actually attended the fire ceremony, and the answer is yes, I did. I went with a friend, and I actually have Kodak pictures from the ceremony, so that helped me to illustrate that chapter. And I did find out about a book, Fire Walking in the US and in Greece. And it was someone had embedded in the village of Lagadas and wrote a doctoral dissertation.
Oh.
And so I used some of his work as well to get some background. And then, you know, Google is an author's best friend. Sally.
Have you been back to Greece since, and have you visited the school again?
So Sally wants to know if I've been back to Greece since then, and if I have visited the school. So I still have very strong relationships with my friends. If those of you who read the book, Lena and her family, I visited them most recently, September a year ago. Yordia, the teacher, is a very good friend of mine, and I speak with both of them every couple of months. And the school, Elipop, was in a very old two-story building that was really difficult to get the wheelchairs up to the second floor, which is where the classrooms were. They moved to a new place, and then I haven't visited that school, but the Stylianou family, Lena and her family, were able to donate some land, and with funds from the government and from the EU, they have built a residence for adults who age out of services and are able to both go there for services in the daytime, and also there are places for them to stay as well. It's for them to live. So and Sotiris Soto is 60. He's written 3 books. He isn't ambulatory any longer, but he rolls around on in office chairs in parts of his house, and he'll like lift himself up and from one chair to the other, and he'll say in Greek, well, you can't say I'm not an acrobat.
Yeah.
So he's his speech is difficult to understand still, but and his access with the computer is very labored, but he does use the computer, and he's quite an amazing man. Amruta.
Did you get a sense that the walking on fire in Greece was kind of a mind over matter thing? I mean, because it's practiced in India as well, in certain parts, and it's to show how much you can control your body, you know, and not be hurt by it.
Yes, so Amruta is asking if my thought was that it's sort of a mind over your body experience doing fire walking, and because fire walking I think originated in India. That's what some of my research showed. But I think it is, you know, I think that would be up to each individual's interpretation. I think the fire walkers who walk in Greece truly believe that it is a religious experience for them. I also read that American corporations sometimes have events of fire walking ceremonies for team building for their people. So, you know, I think that's a different thing. And I believe that I knew of a friend who did attend fire walking ceremonies in Vermont some years ago. So yes, Courtney.
A question from Zoom. What made you go to Greece, especially since you didn't speak Greek? And then what was most surprising about it?
Okay, the question is, what made me go to Greece in the first place since I didn't speak Greek? And what was most surprising about that experience? Well, I really, as I said, I was trying to run away from a very disappointing marriage that ended in divorce. And I wanted to leave the US because I was sort of embarrassed. It was 1972 when the divorce happened. And so I started looking for speech therapy jobs that were overseas, thinking maybe I'd go to a base in Germany or something. And I saw in a speech therapy journal an advertisement for this center. At that time, Greece did not train speech therapists. They trained occupational and physical therapists, but not speech therapists. And so they were hoping a Greek American would respond to their advertisement. I was the only person that responded. And so they said, you know, we can't pay your airfare over, but if you'll come, we will take care of you, which they certainly did. I think the thing that was most surprising, and maybe I'll get emotional here, is how much I fell in love with that country and with the people and with the language and with the customs and with the food and with the hospitality. You know, it was just, I don't know what the kismet was that brought me to that country, but I'm so grateful for it.
Thank you.
So you returned in 2 years, just 2 years. You didn't stay longer or go back again.
That's correct. Well, I lived there 70. So I'm rude to ask if I just was there 2 years. So I lived there 74 to 76. And then I would periodically go visit friends. And then I met Papa Nicolau, who became my husband. And I met him here in Boston. He was here on a radiology fellowship from Thessaloniki. We met through common friends. And so his family lived in Thessaloniki. So every year we would go back and visit. And my daughter, Emilia Antonia Papanikolaou, was baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church in Thessaloniki. And then after he and I divorced, I didn't go back for 10 years or so. And then I think I went back in 2017, and then I went back again the last September a year ago. But it's very much a part of my life.
How was the finding a publisher process?
Okay, the question is, how was it to find a publisher? Well, the publishing business is very competitive. And I knew that it would be hard for somebody like me without a background, or I guess a lot of people find an agent and then the agent shops the book around to publishers. I didn't feel like at my age, I wanted to spend time doing that. And so I thought, well, I'll just self-publish. So just self-publishing, I found out, was a lot more difficult than it sounds. And so I found out about hybrid publishing, which is a combination of traditional publishing and hybrid publishing, where you pay a company, and there are many different hybrid publishers out there, but you pay a company and they shepherd you through the process. And then they provide different services depending on who the company is. So I found out about this women's publishing group called She Writes Press, which was one of the leaders in the field of hybrid publishing. And a friend of mine who was an author said, well, you can try, but they're pretty difficult to get into. So I crossed my fingers, sent 50 first pages of my book and then a synopsis of all my chapters, and went through 2 different rounds of vetting by them before they gave me a contract. And the great thing about this company is, other than they're a wonderful, wonderful company, is that they had distribution, that they work with distributors. So that means my book could be on Amazon and independent bookstores, Barnes and Noble. Otherwise, I would have had books in my basement and made a lot of trips, hopefully, to the Belmont Post Office. So it's been a really wonderful community. And I'll tell you, I guess we're okay with time. I'll tell you a fun story. There are a lot of things in publishing that that I didn't have any idea about. You have to write a tip sheet and all these different forms that go out to publishing houses and go out to distributors. And so you need to find comparable books. And I was having a hard time finding books that were comparable to my own. So I went to the website, She Writes Press, and I saw this woman with a Greek last name. And I thought, well, I'll just check in with her and see if she knows anyone that could be a comp for me. And it turns out she was born in Thessaloniki. And so I wrote her and said, well, my book is, set in Thessaloniki. And I, worked with Greek cerebral palsy children. And she writes back and she said, oh, well, you must know my friend Lena Stiviani. And she and Lena were friends from middle school through high school. And last September when I went, Sophia happened to be in Thessaloniki at the same time, and we met, and we have a wonderful friendship now, and we Zoom. And if anybody's interested, I have cards with my website on them, the addresses on my cards. And when Sophia and I were together, we went on a little boat ride. It was sort of a tourist pirate boat ride at night, out in the bay of Thessalonica. And I happened to meet a man there who had overheard a conversation talking about books, and it turns out his father had been a political prisoner. And I've written this story as a blog on my website, so you might find it interesting. It was just another one of those, just like meeting Sophia, it was another one of those really unexpected happenings. And it was a very heartbreaking story to hear about him and what had happened to his father.
Do you have an idea for a new book?
So Connie and Richard are asking if I have an idea for a new book. I'm taking a break. It was a really wonderful process, and it was a journey. It took me places I never would have gone otherwise, but I'm tired. So I think for the time being, what I'll do is write blogs to go on my website, and when the dust settles, I'll see. But really, writing a book is, for me, it was just a very difficult undertaking. It took a lot. So thank you for that question. So Susan?
Did you have editors? What did you find there for?
Yeah, so Susan is asking if I had editors. I had my brother and my sister-in-law were my very first editors. They live in Iowa. We would meet on Zoom once a week. But then after that, before publication, she writes, strongly suggested that I get a professional copy editor, which I did. And she was wonderful. She sent my piece back and she didn't change anything major, but she said, did you know you used that 720 times? And she said, there are a lot of cliches in here. I'm going to highlight them for you, and things that I didn't consider a cliche when I wrote them. were. She said, "You're a good writer. I'm going to make you a better writer." And I think she did. Linda.
Is the book available to purchase today?
Yes. Thank you, and your money is on the way. So yes, I do have some books here that I would love to sign and to sell today. Pardon me, I do have Venmo, yeah. Yeah. So, are there any other?
Thing online, they asked for your website, so I put that in there.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I just want to say thank you for giving us this opportunity. Because some of us, we love to write and we like to write a book. And I love the fact that you use the we language in your book and the journey. It just was amazing.
Well, thank you, Ingrid. She's saying many people want to write books, and I'll tell you what it takes is actually just sitting down in your chair and writing 5 or 6 days a week and for a period of time. That's what worked for me, having that writing appointment. And so
What was your schedule like? Well, in the morning? Or
yes, usually about 9 o'clock, I'd write for an hour and a half. And then after that, some people can write all day. I could not, but I would write for about an hour and a half. Most days. And then I was in a 9-month course, 2017, with a couple from Taos, New Mexico, who have a program called Right to the Finish. And they say, start with us, and in 9 months, you will have a book. And they were very, very helpful in that regard. So they helped really put the book together as well. But there were, this was before Zoom. So there were telephone calls and email assignments. And it's been a really interesting process to sort of dive down into your subconscious and conscience. And, some of the things that I wrote about in the more adventurous parts of the book, as I said, I read too many Nancy Drew books growing up not to try to have some sort of adventures, and I wanted my protagonist to have agency. I wanted her to be in situations that she had to figure out for herself. So just some of the situations I put her in, I was surprised what I was sort of working out in my own mind. That didn't dawn on me until what had come out, actually. So yeah, so it's a fun process. I highly recommend anybody that is interested in writing, just sit down and see where you go. So thank you all for being here today. It's been a Saturday afternoon with me and my books.